Everyone laughed at him for buying a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But what was in the basement changes everything. Marcus Thompson walked the dusty streets of St. Benedict Springs with his shoulders hunched under the weight of disappointment. At 52, the carpenter had lost his job at the woodworking shop, where he had worked for 23 years, when the company went bankrupt due to competition from big, cheap furniture stores. That's when he decided to spend his last savings buying that abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town, a decision everyone considered completely foolish. "Marcus has finally lost his mind," Mrs. Dorothy commented at the bakery, shaking her head in pity. "He spent $12,000 on a house that's not even worth $2,000. That place is just rotten wood and leaks," added the baker James. "The man threw his money away." The laughter and malicious comments echoed through the streets whenever Marcus passed by, carrying his rusty tools toward the property. Even his sister Martha, the only family he had left, tried to convince him to back out of the purchase. "Marcus, you're being too stubborn," she said in their last conversation before he moved. "This cabin is 15 kilometers from town, there are no neighbors nearby, and you know you have a heart condition. What if something happens?" But Marcus had already made up his mind. After losing his wife Claire 5 years earlier, a victim of a long illness that left him in debt, he needed a fresh start. The cabin represented his last chance to have a home of his own, and perhaps earn some extra income making custom furniture. On the first morning at the property, Marcus woke before sunrise. The cabin was exactly as he expected: a leaky roof, windows without glass, a wooden floor rotten in several spots. But there was something about the structure that stirred a strange hope in him. The main beams were solid, the exterior walls sturdy. "At least I won't have to rebuild everything from scratch," he murmured to himself, starting to assess where to begin the renovations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. For the first 3 days, Marcus worked tirelessly removing broken furniture and cleaning decades of accumulated grime. With each cleaned room, he discovered new problems: completely deteriorated electrical wiring, non-existent plumbing, termites in several floorboards. On the 4th day, while prying up the most damaged floorboards in the kitchen, his sledgehammer hit a hollow area. The different sound caught his attention. He knelt and tapped again. There was definitely an empty space underneath. Carefully, he removed a few more boards and discovered a small stone staircase descending to a basement that did not appear on any house plan. His heart raced. He grabbed his battery-powered flashlight and began to descend the narrow, damp steps. The basement was small, with rough stone walls and a smell of mildew. In the corner were some wooden boxes covered with old cloths. Marcus approached the first box with trembling hands. When he removed the cloth, he found only some moldy books and yellowed papers. Disappointment washed over him. For a moment he had fooled himself into thinking he would find something valuable. He laughed bitterly at himself. How could he have expected his luck to change so easily? But when he opened the second box, his world turned upside down. Hundreds of silver coins glittered in the flashlight's beam. Old coins, some with dates from the 19th century. Along with them were small metal objects that looked very old. A pocket watch, some rings, military medals. Marcus sat down heavily on the cold floor, trying to process what he was seeing. His hands trembled as he picked up one of the coins. It was heavy, genuine. It couldn't be a coincidence. Someone had hidden a treasure there. For several hours he stayed in the basement, examining each object, trying to understand what it meant for his life. Had he finally found the solution to all his financial problems? When he went up to the kitchen, it was already late at night. He put the most valuable objects in a bag and hid it in the makeshift wardrobe. He couldn't sleep. His mind was buzzing with possibilities and worries. The next day, he decided to look for Professor Henry, a retired historian who lived in town and was known to understand antiques. If anyone could give him information about the real value of the findings, it was him. "Good morning, Professor," greeted Marcus nervously when he arrived at the elderly man's simple house. "Could you help me with something?" Professor Henry, a 70-year-old man with white hair and thick glasses, received Marcus with surprise. He knew the carpenter by sight, but they had never spoken. "Of course, Marcus, please come in. How can I help you?" Marcus showed some of the coins and objects he had brought. The professor examined everything with a magnifying glass and reference books for almost 2 hours. His expression gradually changed from curiosity to astonishment. "Marcus, where did you find these pieces?" he finally asked, his voice serious. "On the property I bought. There was a hidden basement. Why? Are they valuable?" The professor sighed deeply. "My friend, you have found an extraordinary collection. These coins are gold and silver dollars from the 18th and 19th centuries. This watch is Swiss, probably from 1850. The medals appear to be from veterans of the Paraguayan War. The historical value is priceless." Marcus felt his legs weaken. How much could this be worth?" "Hard to estimate without a full appraisal, but we're talking about several $100,000, perhaps more." The carpenter needed to sit down. His whole life he had struggled against poverty, worked hard just to survive, and now, when he least expected it, luck had knocked on his door. "Professor, can you help me find out more about these pieces, and guide me on what to do?" "Yes, I can. But Marcus, I need to warn you about something important. News about treasures spreads quickly. When people find out, you will be the target of a lot of pressure and greed. Be very careful about who you trust." The professor's words proved prophetic. The next day, when Marcus returned to the cabin, he found Oscar, the broker who had sold the property, waiting at the door. "Hi, Marcus," greeted the broker with an exaggerated smile. "I thought I'd stop by to see how the renovations are going." Oscar was a 45-year-old man, always well-dressed, with a reputation for being sharp in business. Marcus never liked him much, but the broker had been the only one willing to sell the cabin for the price he could pay. "It's going slowly," replied Marcus suspiciously. "Why the sudden interest?" I like to keep up with my clients. I heard some comments in town. They say you visited Professor Henry yesterday, researching about antiques, huh?" Marcus's stomach turned to ice. How did Oscar find out about the visit to the professor so quickly? St. Benedict Springs was a small town, but not that small. "Just curiosity about the region's history," lied Marcus. I see. Oscar walked around the property, examining everything with attentive eyes. "You know, Marcus, when I sold this cabin to you, I forgot to mention some peculiarities of the property. Nothing important, but I thought I should tell you." "What kind of peculiarities?" "Well, the former owner, Sebastian Andrews, was a very reserved man. He had a reputation as a collector. Some said he hid valuable things around the property. Of course, that might just be a rumor, but—" Oscar shrugged with feigned indifference. Marcus perceived he was being tested. The broker clearly suspected something. "If there were hidden treasures here, they would have been found long ago," he said, trying to sound convincing. "Yeah, probably. But you know how it is, right? If by chance you find anything interesting during the renovations, we should talk. After all, I'm the one who found this opportunity for you. We're kind of partners in this business." The implicit threat was clear. Oscar wanted his share of any discovery. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus replied firmly. All right. But think about this. If there's anything valuable here and the news gets out, you're going to need protection from someone who understands the business, who has connections." Oscar moved closer to him. "Alone, you might end up hurting yourself. There are dangerous people interested in finds like these." After the broker left, Marcus was deeply troubled. Professor Henry's words echoed in his mind. People's greed could turn his blessing into a curse. That night, he couldn't sleep properly. Every time he heard any noise from outside, his heart raced. Could someone be prowling around the property? The next morning, he decided to seek out his only true friend in town, Benedict, a 60-year-old retired mechanic who had always treated him with respect, even in the toughest times. "Benedict, I need to talk to you about something serious," Marcus said, when he arrived at the abandoned workshop, where his friend still tinkered with private cars. "Of course, Marcus. You look worried. What happened?" Marcus told him everything about the discovery underground, showing some of the coins. Benedict listened in silence, whistling softly when he saw the objects. "Man, this is really serious stuff. And you say Oscar has already been there snooping around?" "He has, and he made it very clear he wants a share of whatever I find. That Oscar is dangerous, Marcus. He has a reputation for being dishonest in business. If he learns the extent of the treasure, he'll try to blackmail you or worse. What do you think I should do? Benedict scratched his grey beard, thoughtful. First, you need to find out exactly what you have there. Second, you need to understand your legal rights to the finds. Third, you need to be very careful who you tell about this. Professor Henry said he can help me catalogue everything. The professor is an honest man. You can trust him. But Marcus, there's something you need to know about the former owner of your cabin. What? Sebastian Andrews wasn't just a collector. He was paranoid, distrustful of everyone. He said his family was just waiting for him to pass to steal his things. That's why he isolated himself in that cabin. He died alone 5 years ago without leaving a clear will. And his family. There's a niece, Valerie, who lives in Highland Valley. She tried to contest the property sale at the time, claiming she had rights to the inheritance. But since she couldn't prove anything and the land debt had piled up, the city ended up selling it to settle the taxes. Marcus's heart tightened. If this niece found out about the treasure, she would certainly try to claim the fines. Do you think she might show up? If she learns about the treasure, absolutely. Valerie is a lawyer. She knows the legal procedures. And from what I've heard, she's a determined woman. As if fate were listening to the conversation, the next day Marcus found an elegant 50-year-old woman waiting at the cabin door. She wore a dark suit and carried a document folder. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" she asked in a firm voice. "I am. And you are?" "Valerie Andrews, niece of the late Sebastian Andrews, former owner of this house." She showed some papers. "I need to speak with you about some legal matters related to this property." Marcus felt the floor give way beneath his feet. "What kind of questions?" "May I come in? It's better we talk in private." Reluctantly, Marcus invited her inside. The cabin was still under renovation, with tools scattered about and furniture covered with tarps. "I'll get straight to the point," said Valerie, sitting on a makeshift chair. "I have information that you found objects of historical value on this property. Objects that belong to my uncle." "I don't know what you're talking about." Valerie smiled coldly. "Mr. Thompson, I've been an attorney for 25 years. I know when someone is lying. Furthermore, I have reliable sources who informed me about your visits to Professor Henry and about the visit from the broker Oscar." Marcus realized he was cornered. The news had spread faster than he had imagined. "Even if I had found something, the property is mine. I bought it legally." "Not necessarily." Valerie opened her briefcase and showed documents. "My uncle left a letter, notarized, specifying that any item from his personal collection should be preserved as family heritage. The sale of the house did not include the movable property." "That doesn't make sense. If there were valuable items, why weren't they removed before the sale?" "Because no one knew where they were hidden. My uncle was extremely distrustful and paranoid. He hid his collections in places only he knew." Marcus studied the documents she showed. They seemed genuine, but he didn't understand legal matters. "What exactly do you want?" "I want you to hand over all the objects you found. In return, I will take no legal action against you. Otherwise, I will seek an injunction to confiscate everything, and also sue you for misappropriation of historical heritage." "You can't prove I found anything." "Yes, I can." Valerie showed photos taken with a cell phone. "Oscar took these photos last night when he came back here while you were sleeping. They clearly show the hole in the kitchen floor and the entrance to the basement." Marcus turned pale. The broker had trespassed on his property during the night. "That's breaking and entering." "Perhaps. But the photos prove there is a secret basement, and I have witnesses willing to confirm that you have been researching antiques. A judge will easily conclude that significant finds were made." Valerie stood up and walked around the cabin, as if she already owned the place. "I'm going to be generous with you, Marcus. I know you spent your savings buying this house, and you need money. If you cooperate with me, I will pay a 10% commission on the value of the objects found. It's much more than you could get on your own, facing lawsuits." "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, I will contact my connections in the judiciary and the municipality. Believe me, Mr. Thompson, you'd better accept my friendly proposal." After she left, Marcus sat on the floor of the ruined kitchen and cried. His whole life had been a struggle, and when it finally seemed things might get better, new difficulties arose. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. That afternoon he went to see Professor Henry again. He told him about Valerie's threats and showed the documents she had presented. "These papers seem authentic," said the professor after examining everything carefully. "But there are some inconsistencies a competent lawyer could question." "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Sebastian's letter talks about a personal collection, but it doesn't specify which items. Furthermore, the objects were hidden in a secret compartment of a property that was legally sold to settle debts. There are legal precedents that protect the new owner from chance finds, so I can keep the treasure." "It's not that simple. American law regarding archaeological and historical finds is complex. Depending on the value and historical importance, public heritage can claim the finds." "What does that mean?" "It means if the objects are considered national historical heritage, you could be forced to hand them over to the state, receiving only a small compensation." Marcus felt the ground disappearing beneath his feet again. "So no matter what I do, I'll lose everything?" "Not necessarily. There are legal paths. You can officially register the fines and negotiate fair compensation, or you can try to prove the objects don't have sufficient historical value to be considered public heritage." "And Valerie's threat?" "Her legal basis is weak, but since she's an attorney and you don't have the resources to hire a good lawyer, she could complicate your life a lot with lengthy and expensive lawsuits." That night Marcus didn't sleep at all. He sat in the kitchen looking at the hole in the floor that had changed his life. Through the window without glass he saw the distant city lights and wondered why fate was so cruel to him. The next morning, even before Valerie returned, he received an unexpected visit. An elegant man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and driving an imported car, stopped in front of the cabin. "Good morning. Are you Marcus Thompson?" he asked with a New Yorker accent. "I am, and you are?" "Raymond Moore, antiquarian from New York. I heard through contacts that you found some interesting pieces here." Marcus sighed. The news really had spread everywhere. "Everyone seems to know more about my life than I do." Raymond laughed. "Sorry for the intrusion, but that's how the antiques market works. News about important finds circulates quickly among collectors and dealers." "What do you want?" "I want to make a purchase offer. No legal complications, no lawsuits, no headaches. Money in your account today." Raymond took from his briefcase a check already filled out for $200,000. $200,000 for everything you found. No questions, no complex documentation. Just a simple purchase and sale of old objects. Marcus looked at the check. It was more money than he had ever seen in his entire life. Enough to finish the cabin renovations, buy a pickup truck, set up a complete workshop, and still have some left for emergencies. "How can I be sure this check is real?" "You can call the bank right now and confirm. I've been in the antiques business for 30 years. I have a solid reputation in the market." "And why are you offering so much money if you haven't even properly seen what I found?" Raymond smiled. "Because I know exactly what you found. I have contacts who gave me detailed information about the pieces. They are rare objects of great historical and commercial value. Professor Henry said they could be worth much more than $200,000. That's possible. But how long will it take for you to sell them for higher amounts? How many lawsuits will you face? How many lawyers will you need to pay?" Raymond moved closer to him. "Marcus, may I call you Marcus? You seem like an honest, hard-working man. You need money now, not 5 years from now after fighting in court." The offer was tempting, but something in the antiquarian's smile aroused suspicion. "I need time to think." "Of course, but not too much time. This offer stands until tomorrow morning. After that, the situation could get more complicated for you." After the antiquarian left, Marcus became even more confused. 3 different people wanted the treasure. Oscar claiming partnership rights, Valerie claiming family inheritance, and Raymond offering an immediate purchase. He decided to look for Benedict again to discuss the options. "Man, you're between a rock and a hard place," said his friend after hearing about all the pressures. "Each one of these people has their own interests. None of them are concerned with your well-being. What would you do in my place? First, I would look for an independent lawyer, someone who has no connection to any of the parties involved. Second, I would get an official appraisal of the fines by a competent authority. Third, I would register everything legally before deciding anything. I don't have money for a lawyer. There's public defense, and there are some lawyers in town who take on interesting cases without charging up front. Do you know anyone? I know attorney Miriam. She's young but competent. She works on historical heritage issues. She can guide you properly. On the way to the lawyer's office, Marcus was approached by Oscar on the town's main street. "Marcus, my friend," said the broker with false friendliness, "I heard you're being pressured by old Sebastian's niece, and that an antique dealer from New York showed up after your discoveries. How do you know all this? I've been a broker in this region for 15 years. I have contacts. I hear about things." Oscar put a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, I know you didn't much like my previous approach, but now things have changed. You need protection." "What kind of protection?" "Valerie will try to take everything from you in court. Raymond will tie you up with complex contracts and keep most of the profit." Oscar lowered his voice. "But I know more discreet ways to monetize your discoveries." "Discreet ways?" "I have contacts with private collectors who pay very well for rare pieces without asking too many questions about documentation. You keep 80%, I keep 20% for the brokerage." "Is that legal?" "It's a gray area of the law, Marcus, but that's how the market works. Do you think big museums and collectors always acquire their pieces through official channels?" The proposal sounded dangerous, but Oscar was right about one thing. Both Valerie and Raymond clearly wanted to take advantage of his vulnerable situation. "I'll think about your proposal." "Don't take too long. News of the fines is spreading. Soon more dangerous people interested in the treasure will appear." "More dangerous how?" "People who won't make polite offers, Marcus. People who will simply take what they want." Oscar's threatening tone made Marcus quicken his step toward the lawyer's office. Attorney Miriam was a 35-year-old woman, a graduate of the State University, who had moved to St. Benedict Springs in search of a better quality of life after working at large firms in New York. Her office was modest but organized. "Mr. Marcus, I've heard about your case," she said, after he told the whole story. "It's a complex situation, but not impossible to resolve legally. Can you help me?" "I can, but I need to be honest about the challenges we'll face." She showed some legal codes. The American Civil Code protects the property owner regarding chance fines, but there are exceptions when it comes to historical heritage. What does that mean in practice? It means we need to prove the objects are not historical heritage, important enough to be confiscated by the state, or if they are, to negotiate fair compensation for you. And Valerie's claims. Legally fragile, but she can cause a lot of trouble with delaying lawsuits. The ideal would be to reach a friendly agreement. She wants to keep everything, offering only 10% to me. That is abusive. Based on the documentation you showed me, she would be entitled to at most 20%, and that's only if she could prove that the uncle's letter has legal validity for hidden objects. And the antique dealer from New York? Direct purchase offers are legal, but the price he offered seems far too low. It suggests he knows the objects are worth much more. So what do you advise, ma'am? First, we'll get an official appraisal of the findings through the Historical Heritage Institute. Second, we'll legally register the discovery to protect your rights. Third, if necessary, we'll file a preventive lawsuit to stop third parties from improperly appropriating the objects. How much would this process cost? We can make an arrangement. You only pay the court costs for now. My fees will come from a percentage of what we manage to recover for you. It was the first honest proposal he had received. Marcus decided to accept. In the following days, while awaiting the start of the legal proceedings, the pressure on him intensified considerably. Valerie called daily, demanding an answer. Raymond sent an assistant to remind him about the proposal's deadline, and Oscar started showing up at the cabin unannounced, always with new arguments about why a partnership with him would be better. But the worst was when rumors began circulating through the town that Marcus had found a treasure worth millions of dollars. Suddenly, people who had previously treated him poorly became extremely kind. The market owner offered unlimited credit. The gas station no longer wanted payment for fuel. "Marcus, my friend," said the baker James, who used to make jokes about him. "So good to see you. I heard about your luck. You really deserved it after so much struggle in life. Mrs. Dorothy wants to make a special cake to celebrate your discoveries," added the baker's wife. "Free of charge, of course, for such a dear neighbor." The change in people's attitude made Marcus uncomfortable. He realized everyone wanted something from him now. The sudden friendliness wasn't genuine. Even worse were the strangers who started appearing on the property at night. Marcus would wake up to noises of people trying to approach the cabin. He had to start sleeping with a hammer by the bed and lock all the entrances. One night, he clearly heard voices whispering outside. "Are you sure this is where he hid the coins?" "I am. The broker said it's under the kitchen floor." "What if he's awake? Then we convince him to cooperate." Marcus silently went to the window and saw two hooded figures circling the cabin with flashlights. His heart raced. They were large men, clearly not there for a conversation. He grabbed his cell phone and called the police, but the call dropped. There was no signal on the isolated property. He had to hope the intruders would leave without trying to break in. After 2 hours, he finally heard the sounds of a car driving away. But he couldn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, he found clear signs that someone had tried to force the cabin's back door. There were pry bar marks on the wood and footprints in the mud around the house. He decided he could no longer stay alone on the property. He asked Benedict to spend a few nights there, at least until the legal situation was resolved. "Man, this is getting dangerous," said his friend when he saw the marks of the attempted break-in. "You need to get the objects out of here and hide them in a safe place." "Where can I hide them? If I put them in a bank, they'll ask questions about the origin. If I take them to someone's house, I could compromise that person." "What about leaving them with Attorney Miriam? Lawyers have safes in their offices." It was a good idea. Marcus collected all the objects from under the floor and took them to the attorney's office, who agreed to keep them until the situation was resolved. But removing the treasure from the cabin did not lessen the external pressures. Valerie appeared again, this time accompanied by a man who introduced himself as a private investigator. "Mr. Thompson," she said in a more aggressive tone, "I've come here one last time to make a friendly proposal. My lawyers are already preparing a lawsuit to reclaim my uncle's assets. And I've already hired an attorney to represent me." "What attorney?" "Attorney Miriam." The private investigator whispered something in Valerie's ear, who smiled disdainfully. "Miriam Santos. She's an inexperienced lawyer who has never handled complex historical heritage cases. You're getting bad advice. She seems competent to me. Look, I'll increase my offer. 20% for you, 80% for me. It's my final proposal before moving to a legal confrontation." "I don't accept." "Then prepare for a long and expensive battle. I have the financial resources to sustain a lawsuit for years. Do you?" After they left, Marcus felt even more distressed. Valerie was right about one thing. He didn't have the resources to fund a prolonged legal fight. That afternoon, Raymond returned with a new proposal. "Marcus, I heard you're facing pressure from several people." The antique dealer was understanding. "That's why I decided to increase my offer to $300,000. It's a fair amount, allowing you to sort out your life without complications." $300,000 still seems low for what I found. "It may seem so, but consider this. If you enter a legal dispute, you'll spend at least $100,000 on lawyers. If the state confiscates the items as historical heritage, you'll receive at most $50,000 in compensation. My proposal guarantees $300,000 clear in your account." "I need to talk to my attorney." "Of course, but don't take too long. I already have other suppliers interested in selling similar pieces." When he told Attorney Miriam about the new pressures, she became concerned. "Marcus, they are trying to intimidate you into accepting unfavorable deals, but we have a good chance of getting a better result through legal channels. How long will it take? A few months, perhaps a year if there are appeals. And how much will I spend? The court costs will be around $10,000. My fees will be 20% of what we manage to recover for you. And if we get nothing, then you pay me nothing beyond the court costs." It seemed like a fair deal. Marcus decided to move forward with the legal process. But his decisions had immediate consequences. The next day, Oscar appeared at the cabin, visibly irritated. "Marcus, I heard you hired a lawyer and are rejecting purchase offers. That's not smart." "Why not?" "Because you're unnecessarily complicating things. And when things get complicated, people who don't like complications show up." "What kind of people?" "The kind of people who solve problems directly without lawyers or lawsuits." "Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning. You're a simple man, Marcus. You don't understand how the high-value business world works. There are major interests at stake here." "What interests?" "The objects you found aren't just antiques. Some of those coins are part of collections that disappeared from museums decades ago. There are international collectors willing to pay fortunes for them without asking questions." Marcus's stomach turned to ice. "Are you saying the treasure might be stolen?" "I'm saying the provenance of some pieces may be questionable, and that means the legal route could create problems for you too." "How so?" "If the authorities discover you possess items that may be stolen goods, even if you didn't know, you could be charged with receiving stolen property." "It's a serious crime, Marcus." "But I found everything on my property." "Yes, but how will you prove you didn't put it there after stealing it from somewhere? Who can confirm your version?" Oscar was clearly trying to frighten Marcus, but his words planted seeds of doubt and fear. "What are you proposing?" "That you accept my original offer. We sell the pieces discreetly to private collectors, you keep most of the money, and no one asks questions about provenance." "And if I don't accept, then I can no longer protect you from the people who are coming." "What people?" "People who know you have what they want and won't ask nicely." After Oscar left, Marcus immediately called attorney Miriam and told her about the new threats. "This is clear intimidation," she said. "We'll report everything to the police and request protection." "Do you think he's telling the truth about the pieces possibly being stolen?" "It's possible, but unlikely. If they were objects stolen from museums, there would be records and investigations. I can check the lost or stolen heritage databases. And if some pieces really do have questionable provenance, then we'll have to turn them over to the proper authorities. But that wouldn't invalidate your rights to the legitimate objects. How many more people are going to show up wanting a piece of what I found? Unfortunately, news about treasures attracts all kinds of people. But the law is on your side, Marcus. You just need to be strong and not let yourself be intimidated." But being strong was getting harder and harder. That night, when he returned to the cabin accompanied by Benedict, they found the front door broken and the house turned upside down. The intruders had searched every room, leaving furniture overturned, drawers open, holes in the walls. But they hadn't found anything, since the treasure was stored at the lawyer's office. "They came back," said Benedict, examining the signs of the break-in, "and this time they didn't bother being discreet." "What do you think they were looking for?" "Besides the treasure, maybe documents, maps, clues about other hiding places." Marcus remembered he hadn't fully explored the basement yet. Perhaps there were other secret compartments. That same night, with Benedict keeping watch, he went back down to the basement with better equipment. Powerful flashlights, a hammer, a crowbar. He carefully examined all the stone walls. In one of the walls he found some stones that seemed newer than the others. Carefully, he removed them and discovered a niche with a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter from the former owner, Sebastian Andrews. "To whoever finds this note, if you've come this far, it means you've discovered my hiding place. Congratulations on your curiosity and persistence. The objects you found are legitimate, acquired over 50 years of honest collecting. I have all the receipts and certificates of authenticity stored in the bank, safe deposit box 247 at the main branch in Highland Valley, code 1823, year of independence. I leave these riches to whoever finds them, not to my greedy family who only sought me out when they needed money. If you've come this far by investing your own effort and resources, you deserve to keep the result. But be careful. There are dangerous people who know about my collection. Protect yourself. Signed, Sebastian Andrews, March 15, 2019. Marcus read the letter 3 times before showing it to Benedict. It was as if the old man had foreseen exactly what would happen after his passing. "Man, this changes everything," said his friend. With this letter and the documents in the bank, you have definitive proof that the treasure is legitimate and that it was specifically left for whoever found it. But he talks about dangerous people. Could they be the same ones Oscar mentioned? Probably. Sebastian must have faced similar pressures while he was alive. The next morning, Marcus and attorney Miriam went to the bank in Highland Valley to access the safe mentioned in the letter. With the property purchase documentation and Sebastian's letter, they managed to convince the manager to open the safe. Inside, they found stacks of organized documents, invoices for the purchase of all the coins and objects, certificates of authenticity issued by recognized experts, value appraisals conducted over the years. "Marcus, you've just legally become a millionaire," said the attorney, examining the documents. "With this documentation, no one can question the legitimacy of the objects or your rights to them." And Valerie's claims? Completely nullified. The letter makes it clear your uncle wanted to exclude the family from the findings. And Oscar's threats about questionable provenance? Lies to intimidate you. All the objects have impeccable documentation. Marcus felt immense relief. For the first time in weeks, he could breathe easy. But his peace was short-lived. The next day, when they returned to St. Benedict Springs with all the documentation, they found Valerie waiting at the attorney's office door, accompanied by two menacing-looking men. "Mr. Thompson," she said coldly, "I heard you went to the bank in Highland Valley. I hope you enjoyed the trip because it was your last." "What does that mean?" "It means my patience has run out. You will hand over what is rightfully mine, or we'll settle this another way." Attorney Miriam stepped between them. "Mrs. Valerie, any threats you make are being recorded and will be used as criminal evidence against you." "I'm not making threats, I'm making promises," replied Valerie. "Marcus, you have until tomorrow at noon to come to me with a reasonable proposal. After that, things are going to get unpleasant." The two men accompanying her moved closer to Marcus with unfriendly expressions. "It would be a shame if something happened to your cabin, wouldn't it?" said one of them. "Or to your friends who stay there at night." It was a clear threat against Benedict. After they left, the attorney immediately called the police to report the threats. But the police chief said he needed more concrete evidence to act. "Attorney, they didn't make explicit threats," the chief explained over the phone. "They spoke indirectly. It's hard to characterize a crime without clear evidence. They brought thugs to intimidate my client. But there was no physical assault or direct threat of violence. I can increase patrols in the area, but I can't arrest them preventively." Marcus was beginning to understand why Sebastian had become paranoid. Money really did attract dangerous people. That night, he decided he could no longer put Benedict at risk. He asked his friend not to return to the cabin until the situation was resolved. "I won't leave you alone there," said Benedict. "I can't let you get hurt because of me." "Marcus, we've been friends for 15 years. A friend doesn't abandon a friend in a difficult time." But Marcus was inflexible. That night he slept alone in the cabin, with all doors and windows locked, the hammer beside the bed, and his cell phone always within reach. Around 2 a.m, he heard cars stopping outside. His blood ran cold. Through a crack in the window, he saw 4 men getting out of 2 cars. They were all dressed in dark clothes and carried powerful flashlights. One of them banged hard on the door. "Marcus, we know you're in there. Open the door, we just want to talk." He recognized Oscar's voice. "Go away, I've already called the police." "The police take 40 minutes to get here, Marcus, and we only need 5 minutes to finish our conversation." "I don't have anything here. The objects aren't in the cabin." "We know that, that's why we're here. You're going to tell us where they are." Marcus tried to call the police, but there was no cell signal. The intruders had cut the landline. One of the men began forcing the back door while another broke a side window. They were clearly prepared to break into the house. Marcus panicked. He grabbed the hammer and positioned himself behind the main door, ready to defend himself. But it was 4 men against him. Suddenly he heard the sound of more cars arriving. For a few seconds he thought they were reinforcements for the intruders. But then he heard a familiar voice. "Police! Everyone come out with your hands on your head." It was the town sheriff, accompanied by 4 state troopers. "How did you get here so fast?" asked Marcus when he opened the door. "Your friend Benedict got worried and spent the night watching the access road to your property," explained the sheriff. "When he saw the suspicious cars, he called us. The intruders tried to flee but were captured. Among them was Oscar, who would now have to explain in court what he was doing in a home invasion in the middle of the night. "Marcus, this time we have them caught in the act for breaking and entering, forming a criminal group, and attempted extortion," said the sheriff. "They will face criminal charges. And Valerie? We will investigate her connection to this group. If we confirm she sent them here, she will also be held responsible." With Oscar arrested and his threats neutralized, Marcus could finally focus on the legal aspects of his discovery without fear of violent reprisals. Attorney Miriam managed to expedite the proceedings with the competent authorities. With all the documentation found in the bank, it was possible to definitively prove that the treasure was legitimate and that Marcus had full rights to it. Professor Henry conducted a complete assessment of all the objects based on the certificates of authenticity. The total value reached $3.5 million. "Marcus, you are officially a rich man," said the professor when he delivered the final report. "You have enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life." But wealth brought new dilemmas. Marcus realized he could no longer live in the isolated cabin. The news of his fortune had spread throughout the region, attracting all kinds of opportunists. Merchants offered unmissable deals. Distant relatives who had never sought him out began appearing with urgent financial problems, and strangers called offering security services, miracle investments, and advantageous partnerships. "Here's the price of sudden wealth," explained Attorney Miriam. "You need to learn to say no and to distrust offers that are too good to be true. I just wanted a simple life, working with wood and living in peace. And you can have that. But now with the resources to choose where and how to live." Marcus decided to sell the cabin and move to a safer house in town, but before leaving the place that changed his life, he wanted to make one last exploration of the underground space. With professional equipment borrowed from Professor Henry, he made a complete mapping of the subterranean area. To his surprise, he discovered there was one more secret compartment, smaller than the first, hidden behind a false wall. In this final hiding place, he found something even more valuable than the coins and antique objects: personal letters written by Sebastian over the years, telling his life story. Through the letters, Marcus discovered that Sebastian had lost his wife and children in a car accident 20 years earlier. The pain of the loss led him to isolation and an obsession with historical collections as a way to connect with the past and forget the painful present. "I collect these objects because each one has a story," Sebastian wrote in one of the letters. "Stories of people who lived, loved, suffered, and departed. Just like me, just like all of us. In the end, we are all just antique objects waiting for someone to discover our value." Reading the letters deeply moved Marcus. He realized that Sebastian was not the paranoid and antisocial man everyone described. He was just a man wounded by life, who found in solitude his way of surviving the pain. In one of the last letters, Sebastian wrote, "If someone finds my treasures after my departure, I hope it is a person who understands the true value of things, not just the monetary value, but the value of history, of memory, of preserving the past for future generations." This phrase made Marcus rethink his plans for the treasure. Instead of selling everything and simply becoming rich, he decided to honor Sebastian's memory in a way the old collector would approve of. He sought out the town's mayor and proposed creating a small municipal museum in the renovated cabin, where Sebastian's collection would be displayed alongside the history of the region. "It's an interesting idea, Marcus," said the mayor, "but the town doesn't have the resources to maintain a museum. I will finance the renovation of the cabin and the creation of the collection. The town only needs to commit to keeping the space open for public visitation." "And what would be your financial return?" "The satisfaction of preserving local history and honoring the memory of a man who did not deserve to be forgotten." The project was unanimously approved by the town council. Marcus sold only some of the less significant pieces from the collection, keeping enough to live comfortably. The remainder was donated to form the collection of the Sebastian Andrews Museum of Local History. The news of the donation completely changed people's perception of Marcus. Those who previously saw him as too simple a man or a troublesome nouveau riche now came to respect him as an example of generosity and wisdom. "Marcus, everyone in town is talking about your gesture," said Benedict when the project was officially announced. "You've become a local legend." "I don't want to be a legend. I just want to do the right thing." "And you are." Sebastian would be proud. The cabin renovation took 8 months to complete. Marcus worked personally on much of the carpentry, creating display cases and special supports to exhibit the antique objects. During the work, he discovered more details about Sebastian's life through documents found in the walls during the renovation. The man truly had been a meticulous collector, passionate about American history. In one of the walls, he found a message Sebastian had carved into the wood. "True wealth is not in what we accumulate, but in what we leave for the future." This phrase became the museum's motto. At the inauguration of the Sebastian Andrews Museum, more than 300 people from St. Benedict Springs and neighboring towns attended. Professor Henry gave a lecture on the historical importance of the collection. Attorney Miriam spoke about the legal importance of preserving cultural heritage, and Marcus, nervous, gave a short speech, thanking everyone who had supported him during the difficult times. "When I bought this cabin, everyone laughed at me," he said, looking at the people filling the small museum. "They said I had thrown money away on a worthless property. But I discovered that the value of things is not always where we expect to find it. The greatest treasure I found here wasn't the coins or antique objects. It was the lesson that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, always pays off in the end." The applause was warm and sincere. Valerie appeared at the inauguration, to everyone's surprise. She approached Marcus after the ceremony. "I need to apologize for my behavior," she said, visibly embarrassed. "When I learned about the treasure, greed took over me. I forgot the values my uncle tried to teach me when I was a child." "He didn't hold a grudge against you," said Marcus, showing one of Sebastian's letters. "In this letter, he mentions that he loved you, even though he was disappointed with the distance you created." Valerie read the letter with tears in her eyes. "He was right about me. I only got close when I thought there was money involved." She looked around the museum. "But you did something I would never have had the courage to do. You truly honored his memory. There's still time to make amends. The museum needs volunteers to greet visitors and tell the story of the collection." Valerie accepted the proposal and became one of the museum's main collaborators, dedicating weekends to volunteer work and using her legal knowledge to resolve bureaucratic issues for the project. Oscar, on the other hand, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for breaking and entering, forming a criminal conspiracy, and attempted extortion. In prison, he had time to reflect on his choices. When he was released on parole after a year, he sought out Marcus to ask for forgiveness. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said humbly, "but I wanted you to know that I learned a lot about the kind of person I had become. Greed completely blinded me. Everyone deserves a second chance, Oscar, but it depends on what you intend to do with it. I want to start my life over, far from here, accept a simple job in another town, and try to be a better person." Marcus offered to help Oscar get an honest job in a neighboring town, demonstrating that he had learned to separate the person from their past actions. Raymond, the antiquarian from New York, when he learned about the creation of the museum, offered to donate other historical pieces to enrich the collection. "I've worked with antiques for 30 years, but I've never seen anything as beautiful as what you've done here," he said during a visit to the museum. "You turned greed into generosity, conflict into unity. I just followed Sebastian's example. He understood that the true value of historical objects lies in sharing them, not in hiding them." The Sebastian Andrews Museum became a regional tourist attraction. Schools brought students to see the collection and learn about local history. Researchers came to study the pieces. Tourists included the site in their itineraries through the Blue Ridge Mountains. The income generated by tourism benefited the entire town. New restaurants opened to serve visitors. Local artisans began selling products inspired by the museum's pieces. Tour guides were trained to tell the story of Sebastian and Marcus. "You've turned St. Benedict Springs into a tourist destination," said the mayor during the celebration of the museum's first year. "What started as the purchase of an abandoned cabin became the most important project in our town's history." Marcus, now 54, had found a new purpose in life. He worked as a volunteer curator for the museum, greeted visitors, told the story of the collection, and guided researchers interested in the pieces. His personal life had also changed. During the work of creating the museum, he met Helen, a 48-year-old historian who came from New York to catalogue the collection. The two gradually fell in love, united by a shared passion for preserving history. "I never imagined I would find someone who understood my obsession with old objects," said Helen, when Marcus asked her to marry him 2 years after the museum's inauguration. "And I never imagined I would find someone who made me want to share my life again," he replied. The wedding was celebrated at the museum itself, with a simple party for friends and family. Professor Henry was the best man. Benedict was the groomsman. Valerie organized the decorations. Even some of Marcus's former detractors attended to congratulate him. "From an abandoned cabin to an altar in a museum," joked Benedict during the speech. "Who would have thought that buying that property everyone considered useless would lead to all this?" Helen and Marcus moved into a comfortable house in town, but spent most of their time at the museum, working together on expanding the collection and developing new educational projects. 3 years after its opening, the Sebastian Andrews Museum received state recognition as a cultural heritage site of New York. The award brought national visibility to the project and additional resources for expansion. "Marcus, you've achieved something few people do," said attorney Miriam, who had become a close friend throughout the process. "You turned a personal conflict into a collective victory. I think I just followed the signs life gave me. The cabin, the treasure, the people who appeared along the way. It all seemed part of a bigger plan. Do you believe it was fate? I believe it was a combination of luck, hard work, and the right choices at decisive moments." Helen, who had become an expert on Sebastian's history through researching his personal documents, discovered that the old collector had family ties to important historical figures of the region. Sebastian was the great-grandson of one of the pioneers of coffee cultivation in Paradise Valley, she shared during a lecture at the museum. His obsession with collecting came from a family tradition of preserving memory. This discovery led to the creation of a second wing of the museum, dedicated specifically to the history of the region during the coffee cycle. Local farmers donated family heirlooms to enrich the exhibition. The project grew so much that Helen had to leave her job in New York to dedicate herself full-time to the museum. She became the official director, while Marcus continued as curator and the main storyteller for visitors. "Who would have thought that I, a simple carpenter, would end up working in a museum?" he commented to Benedict during one of his friend's regular visits. "You were always more than a simple carpenter, Marcus. You always had wisdom and generosity. The treasure just gave you the opportunity to show it to the world." On weekends, when the museum was closed to the public, Marcus would return to the basement where it all began. No longer damp and dark, but well lit and organized as part of the exhibition, the place had become his space for reflection. There, sitting in the same spot where he had discovered the treasure 6 years earlier, he thought about the incredible journey his life had taken. From poverty to wealth, from isolation to recognition, from distrust to love. "Thank you, Sebastian," he whispered into the empty space, as if the former owner could hear him. "You taught me that the real treasure isn't in what we keep for ourselves, but in what we share with others." One afternoon, while organizing some documents in the basement, Marcus found one last letter from Sebastian, hidden in a crack in the wall that only revealed itself when one of the stones came loose due to moisture. The letter was dated just 1 week before Sebastian's departure and contained a surprising revelation. "To whoever finds this last note, if you have come this far and decided to preserve my collection instead of selling it, it means you understood the true meaning of my life. There is one last secret I want to share. Under the loose stone in the northeast corner of this basement, there is an envelope with instructions for finding my final collection, the most precious of all. They are not objects of monetary value, but of emotional value, love letters that my wife Mary wrote to me over 30 years of marriage. If you were worthy of finding my material treasures, you will certainly be worthy of preserving my sentimental treasures. Use these letters to show the world that behind every paranoid collector, there is a man who loved and was loved. This is my final wish, that people remember me not just for what I collected, but for who I was before pain changed my life." Marcus followed the instructions and found the envelope with nearly 200 love letters, preserved in perfect condition. The letters revealed a completely different Sebastian, passionate, romantic, full of plans and dreams for the future. The discovery of the letters completely changed the narrative about Sebastian at the museum. Instead of being remembered as an isolated and distrustful man, he came to be seen as someone who had been broken by pain, but kept the memory of love alive through his obsession with preservation. Helen organized a special exhibition with the love letters, creating a space dedicated to the relationship between Sebastian and Mary. The exhibition became one of the most visited at the museum, especially by couples who identified with the love story preserved through the years. "These letters show that we are all more complex than we appear on the surface," commented Helen during the opening of the special exhibition. "Sebastian teaches us that even the deepest pain can be transformed into something beautiful through love and the preservation of memory." The discovery of the letters also brought an unexpected visitor to the museum. Michael, a grandson of Sebastian that no one knew existed. Son of a daughter Sebastian had lost in the accident, who was pregnant at the time. "My mother died in the accident when I was just 2 months old," shared Michael, a 25-year-old man, during his first visit to the museum. "I was raised by my father's family and only learned about the existence of my grandfather Sebastian a few months ago, when I saw a news report about the museum on television." Michael's arrival deeply moved Marcus and Helen. Finally, Sebastian had a descendant to learn his story and be proud of his legacy. "Your grandfather was an extraordinary man," said Marcus, showing Michael all the collections. "He preserved the history not only of the region, but of the family itself. These love letters with your grandmother Mary are treasures more valuable than all the ancient coins." Michael decided to move to St. Benedict Springs to volunteer at the museum and learn more about his family's history. With a degree in tourism, he brought new ideas to attract visitors and modernize the museum experience. "It's as if everything had fallen perfectly into place," commented Helen. "Sebastian wanted to preserve the family memory, and now he has a grandson doing exactly that." Michael's presence at the museum completed the circle of the story. What began with a lonely man collecting objects to preserve the past transformed into a family institution dedicated to sharing history and memories with the public. 10 years after buying the cabin everyone considered useless, Marcus had become a respected figure in the region, known not for his wealth, but for his wisdom and generosity. The Sebastian Andrews Museum was visited by over 20,000 people a year, generating jobs and income for the entire town. "Do you realize what you've accomplished, Marcus?" asked Professor Henry, now 80 years old, during one of his regular visits to the museum. "You turned the discovery of a treasure into a life lesson for thousands of people. I think I just did what any decent person would do." "No, my friend. Many decent people would have sold everything and become rich quietly. You chose something much more difficult, using your good fortune to benefit others." That night, when the museum closed and everyone had left, Marcus stayed alone in the basement, as he regularly did. It was his moment for reflection and gratitude. Looking at the space where he had found the first chest with ancient coins, he thought about how a simple decision to buy an abandoned cabin had transformed not only his life, but the lives of many other people. Sebastian found peace through the preservation of his collection. Valerie redeemed herself by working at the museum. Michael discovered his origins. Helen found love and a new career. The town gained prosperity. Hundreds of students learned about local history. Thousands of tourists took home the inspiring story of generosity and cultural preservation. "Thank you," murmured Marcus, addressing both Sebastian and the fate that had guided him there, "for teaching me that the true value of things is not in what they can give us, but in what we can give through them." Outside, Helen waited for him with a smile, as she did every evening. "Ready to go home?" "More than ready," he replied, taking one last look at the basement that changed his life. As they walked together along the road leading to town, Marcus thought that perhaps the real treasure he had found in the cabin wasn't the ancient coins, but the opportunity to discover who he truly was when tested by fortune, pressure, and difficult choices. And from what he saw around him, A thriving museum, a revitalized town, repaired relationships, a beloved wife, a clear life purpose. He had passed the test with flying colors. Everyone had laughed at him for buying a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But what was in the basement really changed everything, not just his financial situation, but his understanding of what truly matters in life. Not what we accumulate, but what we share. Not what we hoard, but what we preserve for future generations. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now, continuing. Years later, when Marcus turned 60, the City Council organized a ceremony to honor him as an honorary citizen of St. Benedict Springs. During the ceremony, hundreds of people who had been positively impacted by his story gathered to show their gratitude. Marcus Thompson transformed what could have been just a story of personal enrichment into a lesson on how generosity multiplies blessings, said the mayor during the tribute speech. Among those present were students who had done school research on Sebastian's collection, local artisans who prospered from cultural tourism, researchers who used the museum's collection in their dissertations, and dozens of residents who found employment directly or indirectly related to the project. When I bought that cabin, I only thought about having a place to restart my life, said Marcus during his thank you speech. I never imagined such a simple decision could generate so many positive transformations. This taught me that our choices have consequences far greater than we can predict, and that's why we should always choose based on love, generosity, and hope for a better future for everyone. The applause was long and emotional. Benedict, now his close friend and best man, cried openly during the speech. I always knew you were special, Marcus, he said after the ceremony, but to see everything you managed to build from that old cabin, it's too inspiring. All of this was only possible because I had true friends like you by my side in the difficult moments. The week after the tribute, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was a documentary producer from New York who wanted to tell his story to a national audience. Mr. Marcus, your story has all the elements people need to hear these days: perseverance, honesty, generosity, and the ability to turn challenges into opportunities, said the producer during their first conversation. I don't know if my story is that interesting. It's one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. A simple man who could have gotten rich quietly, but chose to use his fortune to benefit an entire community. That needs to be shared. Marcus agreed to participate in the documentary, but on one condition: that part of the revenue generated would go to a scholarship fund for local students interested in researching regional history. The documentary, The Subterranean Treasure, a story of generosity, aired on a national network and received excellent ratings. Thousands of people from across the country were inspired by Marcus's story and began visiting St. Benedict Springs specifically to see the Sebastian Andrews Museum. You've become a national celebrity, Helen joked after letters from admirers from various states started arriving. I hope fame doesn't change who we are. It won't. You've already proven you can handle things much harder than fame. You'll handle this too. And he truly did. Marcus continued living simply, working at the museum, welcoming visitors with the same humility as always. The only difference was that now he needed to set aside more time to receive journalists and students who came from afar to hear his story in person. One of the most special visitors was a group of retirees from a neighboring town, all over 65, who traveled specifically to see the museum after watching the documentary. Your story inspired us not to give up on our dreams, said Mrs. Francis, 72 years old, the group's spokesperson. If you manage to transform your life at 52, we too can make important changes in our lives. It's never too late to start over, replied Marcus. Age brings experience and wisdom that can be very useful in new projects. The group of retirees was so inspired that they decided to create a similar project in their town, organizing a community museum with items donated by local families. Marcus and Helen helped them with technical and bureaucratic guidance. You are multiplying the impact of our story, said Helen when she visited the new community museum. This is how good ideas spread through the world. This multiplication of projects inspired by Marcus's story happened in several other towns. The concept of community museums based on donations from local families became a trend in the region, always with the technical and moral support of the Sebastian Andrews Museum. "You've started a social movement," commented attorney Miriam, who remained a trusted lawyer and close friend. "You've proven that one person can truly make a difference when they choose the right path." 15 years after the discovery of the treasure, Marcus was organizing the museum's documents when he found a letter addressed to him, hidden among Sebastian's papers. It was a letter that had apparently gone unnoticed during all previous cataloguing. The letter was sealed and had a curious instruction. "Open only 15 years after the discovery of the treasure, if the discoverer has honored the collector's memory through historical preservation." With trembling hands, Marcus opened the letter. It was Sebastian's final message. "If you are reading this, it means you have fulfilled your mission to preserve my collection and honor my memory. 15 years is enough time to prove your intentions were genuine and lasting. Therefore, I wish to reveal my final secret. There is one last treasure hidden, but this one is not material. It is informational. In the Highland Valley Bank, Safe Deposit Box 248, Code 1889, Proclamation of the Republic, there are documents that prove my collection was just a small part of a much larger collection. I am a descendant from a family of collectors who preserved historical artifacts for generations. The documents in the safe contain instructions for finding other hiding places on properties that belonged to my family throughout Paradise Valley. But heed this. I only reveal this because I trust you will use these findings for the common good, as you did with my collection. This is my final test of trust. Use this information to expand regional historical preservation. Signed, Sebastian Andrews, an admirer of your character." Marcus was in shock. There were more historical treasures scattered throughout the region, and Sebastian had tested his honesty for 15 years before revealing this information. He immediately shared the discovery with Helen and Professor Henry. Together, they went to the bank in Highland Valley and found the second safe, filled with maps, genealogical documents, and detailed instructions about other historical hiding places. "Marcus, this could revolutionize the historical preservation of the entire Paradise Valley," said Professor Henry, examining the documents. "We're talking about at least 8 different locations with potentially significant historical collections. And now, what do we do with this information? What you've always done, the right thing. We'll create a regional historical preservation project involving several towns and institutions." The revelation of Sebastian's documents led to the creation of the Regional Historical Preservation Institute of Paradise Valley, with Marcus as honorary president and Helen as executive director. In the following months, teams of historians, archaeologists, and researchers investigated the properties mentioned in Sebastian's documents. In 6 of the 8 locations, significant historical collections were found, including rare documents from the colonial period, pre-Columbian indigenous objects, and artifacts from the coffee cycle. "Sebastian wasn't just a paranoid collector," said Helen during a press conference about the discoveries. "He was the guardian of a family tradition of historical preservation that lasted more than 200 years. The multiple discoveries attracted national and international attention. Universities sent researchers to study the findings. The state government declared several of the locations as historical heritage. International television channels produced documentaries about the greatest civilian archaeological discovery in recent American history. But even with all the worldwide attention, Marcus remained true to his principles. All findings were turned into community museums or donated to public research institutions. Not a single object was sold to private collectors. "You could have become a billionaire with all these discoveries," commented an international journalist during an interview. "Why be a billionaire?" replied Marcus simply. "I have a wife I love, true friends, a life with purpose, and the respect of the community. What greater wealth can there be?" The answer went viral on social media and was quoted in dozens of articles about ethics, generosity, and human values. At 65, Marcus was invited to give lectures at universities about historical preservation and social responsibility. Always reluctant about fame, he only accepted the invitations when he was sure his message could inspire people to make better choices in their own lives. "My story isn't about finding treasures," he would say during the lectures. "It's about always choosing to do what is right, even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier or more profitable to do the opposite." One of the most moving lectures was at a university in New York for history and museum studies students. At the end, a student asked, "Professor Marcus, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?" Marcus thought for a few seconds before answering, "I would buy that cabin even faster, and maybe I'd have the courage to trust more in the good people who appeared on my path. My initial distrust made me suffer unnecessarily." "Do you regret donating so much money instead of keeping it for yourself?" "Never. Money kept is just paper. Money used to create something that benefits others transforms into happiness, knowledge, opportunities. That has eternal value." The years passed, and Marcus's story continued to inspire people around the world. The Sebastian Andrews Museum became a pilgrimage site for those seeking examples of how to turn luck into social responsibility. Michael, Sebastian's grandson, gradually took over the museum's administration, allowing Marcus and Helen more time for personal projects. They decided to travel across the United States, visiting other community museums and historical preservation projects. "It's our active retirement," Helen would joke. "Instead of staying home watching television, we're going to meet inspiring people who are making a difference in their communities." During one of these trips, they visited a small town in the Northeast where a retired teacher had created a museum about local culture in an abandoned house she bought with her savings. "Your story inspired me not to give up when everyone said I was crazy," the teacher told Marcus. "If a carpenter could create something so important, a teacher could try too." "And you succeeded," replied Marcus, admiring the small but well-organized collection. "You proved that what matters isn't the size of the project, but the love and dedication we put into it." Stories like this repeated in various towns they visited. Marcus's story had become a positive urban legend, inspiring ordinary people to make an extraordinary difference in their communities. At 70, Marcus decided to write a book telling his complete story, from the purchase of the cabin to the multiple discoveries about Sebastian. The book was launched with the title The Subsoil of Generosity, and all proceeds were directed to a scholarship fund for history students. "Why did you decide to write the book now?" asked a journalist during the launch. "Because I realized my story doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all the people who can be inspired by it to make better choices. A book allows the message to reach people I could never reach personally." The book became a national bestseller and was translated into 12 languages. Universities adopted it as required reading in ethics, history, and social responsibility courses. But Marcus's greatest pride didn't come from awards or recognition. It came from the letters he received from ordinary people who had changed their lives inspired by his story. A particularly moving letter arrived from an 80-year-old widow who had used her savings to create a community library in her hometown. "Mr. Marcus, I read your book and cried with emotion. My husband passed away 5 years ago and left a small inheritance. Everyone advised me to save the money for medical emergencies. But after reading your story, I decided to use the money to create something that would benefit my community. I opened a library in a rented house with books donated by local residents. Today we host 50 children a day for reading activities. I have never felt so useful and happy in all my life. Thank you for teaching me that generosity is the best investment we can ever make. This letter is worth more than all the awards we've ever received," said Marcus to Helen, with tears in his eyes. "It's proof that your story has fulfilled its true purpose, to inspire other people to be better." In the last years of his life, Marcus dedicated himself mainly to receiving visitors at the museum and personally telling his story to anyone who was interested. Even with age-related health problems, he made a point of being present whenever possible. "Why don't you retire completely?" Helen would ask when he insisted on working, even on days he felt more tired. "Because every person who hears this story might be inspired to do something extraordinary with their own life. How can I retire from such an important responsibility?" One afternoon, while telling his story to a group of university students, Marcus had a profound reflection on his journey. "When I bought that cabin, I thought I was making the only possible choice to restart my life. I didn't know I was starting an adventure that would last decades and touch the lives of thousands of people. That taught me that we never know where our courageous decisions might lead us. That's why it's always worth choosing courage over fear, generosity over selfishness, hope over despair. One of the students asked, "Professor, what was the most difficult moment of your entire journey?" Marcus thought for a few minutes before answering. "The most difficult moment was when I realized my luck had awakened greed and wickedness in people I thought I knew. It was painful to discover that money can reveal the worst side of people, but I also discovered there are far more good people in the world than bad ones. The secret is not to let the bad experiences stop us from trusting the good people." And what was the happiest moment? The happiest moment wasn't when I found the treasure. It was when I realized I had managed to honor Sebastian's memory by turning his collection into something that benefits the whole community. In that moment, I understood I had found my true purpose in life. At 75, Marcus began to feel his energy waning. The doctors recommended he reduce his activities, but he refused to stop working at the museum completely. "Helen, promise me one thing," he said one quiet afternoon as they organized documents in the museum office. "What do you want me to promise? That you'll keep telling our story even after I'm no longer here. That you'll keep alive the message that generosity always pays off. That doing the right thing is worth more than any material wealth." "Marcus, don't talk like that. You still have many years ahead. I may or may not, but I want to be sure our story will keep inspiring people for generations. That's the real treasure we built together," Helen promised with tears in her eyes. That night, Marcus had a vivid dream. He dreamed he was back in the cabin's basement, on the day he found the first chest of old coins. But this time, Sebastian was there with him. "Marcus," said the old collector in the dream, "you have exceeded all my expectations. Not only did you preserve my collection, but you transformed my story of solitude into a story of community unity." "I just followed my heart, Sebastian. And that's exactly what I hoped you would do. People like you are rare. That's why I chose to hide the treasures instead of leaving them to greedy family. I knew that eventually someone worthy would find them." "Did you know I would buy the cabin?" "I didn't know it would be you specifically, but I knew a person with a pure heart would eventually make their way here. The universe has a way of putting the right things in the hands of the right people." "And now? What happens now?" "Now you can rest in peace, knowing you have fulfilled your mission on Earth. You turned luck into generosity, challenges into opportunities, conflict into unity. You left the world better than you found it." Marcus woke from the dream with a feeling of peace he hadn't felt in years. After a few days, he noticed his energy was returning and his willingness to work had been renewed. "I had a very significant dream," he told Helen. "I think Sebastian came to tell me that our mission is complete, but that we still have work to do." "What kind of work?" "Ensuring our story continues to inspire people long after we are no longer here." With this renewed motivation, Marcus and Helen began working on creating a foundation to perpetuate the values demonstrated in their journey. The Sebastian Andrews Foundation would be dedicated to supporting community historical preservation projects across the United States. "We want our story to be just the beginning," explained Helen during the foundation's launch. "We want to inspire thousands of other similar stories across the entire country." The foundation started small but grew quickly, with donations from people inspired by Marcus's story. In no time, it was funding historical preservation projects in dozens of American cities. One of the first projects funded was the restoration of an abandoned colonial church in a historic town in the mining state. The project employed dozens of local artisans and transformed the church into a community cultural center. "This is exactly what we wanted to see happen," said Marcus when he visited the restored church. "Our story inspiring other people to preserve historical heritage and benefit their communities." At 80 years old, Marcus was honored by the federal government as the national patron of community historical preservation. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., with national and international authorities in attendance. "Marcus Thompson represents the best of the American character," said the Minister of Culture during the ceremony. "He turned a personal discovery into a collective benefit, proving that individual generosity can generate profound social transformations. During his acceptance speech, Marcus went straight to the point. This honor is not for me. It is for all Americans who choose to do the right thing even when no one is watching. It is for all the people who use their luck, their talent, or their resources to benefit others. We are millions of people making a difference quietly in our communities. I just had the luck of having my story told. The standing ovation lasted more than 5 minutes. On the trip back to St. Benedict Springs, Helen remarked, "Do you realize you've become a national symbol of generosity and integrity? Symbols are important to inspire others. If my story can motivate someone to be more generous or more principled, then all this public exposure was worth it." Back in his town, Marcus returned to the quiet routine of working at the museum and receiving visitors. But now he had an even clearer understanding of his role in the world. "I am no longer just the man who found a treasure," he told a group of students during one of his regular talks. "I am living proof that anyone can turn their life into an inspiring example for others. All of you have that same capacity. The question is, what kind of example do you want to be?" The question always generated deep reflection in the listeners. One day, while organizing documents in the museum basement, Marcus found another letter from Sebastian that had gone unnoticed during all the cataloging. This letter had a different instruction: open only when you turn 80 and are certain you have completely fulfilled your mission. As he had just turned 80, Marcus opened the letter immediately. "My dear successor, if you are reading this at 80 years old, it means you have dedicated 3 decades of your life to honoring my memory and preserving historical heritage. For this reason, I want to make my final revelation. You did not find my treasures by chance. I chose you. I observed you for months before departing. I saw how you treated people, how you worked honestly even in financial difficulties, how you were generous even with little. That is why I left clues that would lead you to my cabin. The real estate agent who sold you the property had received instructions from me to offer it specifically to you at the price you could afford. Everything was planned because I knew you would be worthy of my treasures and would put them to good use. You were not lucky, Marcus. You were chosen, and my expectations about your character were completely confirmed. Thank you for an entire life dedicated to doing the right thing. Signed, your eternal admirer, Sebastian Andrews." Marcus read the letter 3 times before fully understanding its meaning. Everything had been planned by Sebastian. He had not found the treasure by chance. He had been chosen to find it. The revelation moved him deeply. It meant that Sebastian had trusted him completely, even without having met personally. "Helen, you need to read this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. After reading the letter, Helen remained silent for several minutes. "This changes our perception of the whole story," she finally said. "It wasn't a coincidence. It was a character test that lasted decades, and you passed with the highest distinction. Sebastian was right about one thing. I would have made exactly the same choices even knowing I was being tested, because they were the right choices to make. That's why he chose you. He was certain you would do the right thing regardless of the circumstances." The discovery of Sebastian's last letter gave Marcus a sense of closure he didn't know he needed. His entire journey, from buying the cabin to creating the foundation, had been validated by the very man who started it all. That night, Marcus dreamed of Sebastian again. This time, the old collector was smiling. "Now you know the complete truth," Sebastian said in the dream, "and you remain the same person of integrity I chose 30 years ago. Thank you for trusting me, Sebastian. Thank you for proving that my trust was well placed. You transformed my solitary collection into community heritage, my sad story into an inspiring history, my distrust of people into proof that there are wonderful people in the world. What happens now? Now you can live your final years with the certainty that you have perfectly fulfilled your mission, and you can die in peace, knowing you have left a legacy that will last for generations." Marcus woke from the dream with a deep sense of gratitude and fulfillment. In the following years, even with his health weakened by age, he continued working at the museum whenever possible. His story had become a worldwide legend about generosity, integrity, and social responsibility. Students from dozens of countries visited St. Benedict Springs to meet in person the man who transformed a treasure discovery into a life example. Every visitor left inspired to make a positive difference in their own community. "Professor Marcus," asked a Japanese student during one of the last interviews he gave, "what is your message for future generations?" "My message is simple. Never underestimate the power of the right choices. A single decision to do what is right, even when difficult, can transform not only your life but the lives of many others. Always choose generosity over selfishness, truth over lies, courage over fear. The world needs people who make the right choices." Do you consider yourself a hero? No. I consider myself an ordinary person who had an extraordinary opportunity to make important choices. Anyone can be a hero in the small decisions of daily life, helping a neighbor, being honest in business, sharing knowledge, preserving something important for future generations. Heroism isn't only for dramatic situations. It's in the everyday choices we make when no one is paying attention. The interview was seen by millions of people around the world and went viral on social media, inspiring community generosity movements in several countries. At 85 years old, Marcus began to feel that his energy was finally running out. He dedicated himself mainly to writing guidance letters for people who asked for advice on how to replicate projects similar to the museum. One of the most touching letters was sent to a retired teacher from the northern state who wanted to create a museum about German immigration in her town. "Dear teacher, your intention is noble and necessary. Preserving the history of immigration is essential so future generations understand their origins. My advice is, start small, but start. Use your own home if necessary. Ask for donations of objects from families descended from immigrants. Organize everything with care and dedication. The community will soon see the value of the project and begin to support it. Remember, the size of the project doesn't matter. What matters is the sincerity of the intention and persistence in execution. You can count on our foundation's support when you need it. I wish you success. With admiration, Marcus Thompson." Letters like this were sent weekly to people from all over the United States who were inspired by Marcus's story to create their own historical preservation projects. During the week of his 86th birthday, Marcus received an emotional surprise. Over 1,000 letters from people all over the world who had been inspired by his story to make a difference in their communities. "Marcus," said Helen, organizing the letters on the office desk, "do you realize how many lives you've touched over all these years? I realize that Sebastian made the right choice when he decided to test me. If my story inspired 1,000 people to be more generous, then our mission was fulfilled multiplied by 1,000. Among the letters were extraordinary stories. A doctor in the Western state who created a museum about traditional indigenous medicine, a housewife in St. Catharines State who turned her home into a community library, a retiree in the Bay State who organized a collection on Afro-American culture, dozens of teachers who created school museums about local history. Each of these stories proves your message has multiplied across the world," said Michael, who now fully managed the museum, allowing Marcus to dedicate himself only to answering correspondence. "It's not my message," corrected Marcus. "It's Sebastian's message, transmitted through my story, multiplied by each person who decides to make a difference in their community." On the day of his 87th birthday, Marcus woke with a strange feeling of peace and completeness. He spent the day rereading some of Sebastian's letters and revisiting the basement where it all began. "Helen," he said at the end of the day, "I think the time has come to make my final contribution to our story." "What contribution?" "I want to write a final letter to be read only after I'm gone, a letter with my reflections on everything I learned during this extraordinary journey." Helen was moved, but understood it was important for Marcus to have this sense of closure. Marcus spent an entire week writing his final letter. In it, he recorded all the lessons learned, all the significant moments, all the important people he had met along the way. The letter ended with these words: "To whoever reads this letter in the future, my life proved that any ordinary person can become extraordinary through the choices they make. I was just an unemployed carpenter who bought an abandoned cabin. But the choices I made after that purchase transformed not only my life but the lives of thousands of other people. This didn't happen because I was special. It happened because I always chose to do what I believed was right, even when it was difficult. You have the same potential. You don't need to find hidden treasures to make a difference in the world. You just need to choose generosity over selfishness, truth over lies, courage over fear. The world is full of abandoned cabins waiting for people willing to transform them into something beautiful. The world is full of hidden treasures waiting for people willing to share them instead of hoarding them. Be those people. The future of humanity depends on people who make the right choices. Signed, Marcus Thompson, carpenter, discoverer of treasures, but most of all a person who tried to always do the right thing. After finishing the letter, Marcus sealed it and asked Helen to keep it with instructions that it only be opened after his passing. "This letter is my final gift to the world," he said. "I hope it inspires people to make their own extraordinary discoveries." That night, Marcus had his final dream of Sebastian. This time, the old collector was accompanied by an elegant woman he introduced as his wife, Mary. "Marcus," said Sebastian in the dream, "the time has come for you to rest. You fulfilled your mission perfectly. You transformed my story of solitude into a story of unity. You transformed my legacy of distrust into a legacy of generosity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Sebastian. Thank you for proving that my trust in human character was justified. Because of you, I believe again that there are good people in the world." Mary approached and said, "The love letters you preserved in the museum kept our story alive. Future generations will know that behind every story of solitude, there is a love story that deserves to be remembered." "And now?" asked Marcus. "Now you can depart in peace, knowing you left the world better than you found it," replied Sebastian. "Your story will continue to inspire people for centuries." Marcus woke from the dream with a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. He knew his earthly journey was coming to an end, but he also knew he had completely fulfilled his mission. 3 days later, on a sunny spring morning, Marcus fell asleep peacefully in his favorite armchair, in the museum office, surrounded by the historical objects he had preserved and the letters from people he had inspired. Helen found him a few hours later, with a serene smile on his face and one of Sebastian's letters in his hands. Marcus's funeral was one of the largest displays of gratitude ever seen in St. Benedict Springs. Thousands of people traveled from all over the United States and from other countries to pay tribute to the man who had transformed a treasure discovery into a life example. During the ceremony, Helen read the final letter Marcus had written. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd when she finished the reading. "Marcus left us the greatest treasure of all," she said in her final speech. "The proof that an ordinary person can become extraordinary through the choices they make. We can all honor his memory by making our own extraordinary choices in our daily lives." Professor Henry, now 90 years old, insisted on being present despite his advanced age. Marcus proved that the true value of historical discoveries isn't in the money they can generate, but in the knowledge and inspiration they can provide. He transformed archaeological finds into life lessons. Benedict, the faithful friend throughout the entire journey, cried openly during the entire funeral, "I lost my best friend, but the world gained an eternal example of how to be a better person." Valerie, who had completely redeemed herself over all these years of volunteer work at the museum, said, "Marcus taught me that it's never too late to change, to choose to be a better person. For him, I will continue working at the museum for the rest of my life. Michael promised to keep the story of Marcus and Sebastian alive. My grandfather Sebastian chose well when he selected Marcus to receive his treasures. Now it is my responsibility to ensure the story of the two continues to inspire people all over the world." In the months following Marcus's passing, the Sebastian Andrews Museum received even more visitors. His story had become a legend about how a person can turn luck into social responsibility. The Sebastian Andrews Foundation continued to grow under Helen's direction, funding historical preservation projects throughout the United States. Each project was an extension of the legacy of generosity left by Marcus. 1 year after his passing, a statue of Marcus was unveiled in the central square of St. Benedict Springs. The statue showed the carpenter with his tools in one hand and an ancient coin in the other, symbolizing his journey from a simple worker to a worldwide inspiration. On the statue's plaque was engraved the phrase that became his motto: "The true treasure is not in what we find, but in what we do with what we find." 5 years later, Marcus's story was made into a film, produced with funds from the foundation itself. All profits from the film were directed to historical education projects in American public schools. The film was watched by millions of people around the world and inspired the creation of hundreds of new community historical preservation projects. 10 years after Marcus's passing, Helen organized a grand celebration in honor of the 10th anniversary of his passing. People from all over the world gathered in St. Benedict Springs to share stories about how they had been inspired by Marcus. An American teacher told how he created a museum about Italian immigration in his town. A Canadian nurse spoke about the cultural center she organized to preserve indigenous traditions. Dozens of Americans shared historical preservation projects they had developed, inspired by Marcus's story. "Marcus did not leave," said Helen during the ceremony. "He multiplied. He lives in every person who chooses to make a difference in their community, in every historical preservation project created in small towns, in every act of generosity inspired by his story." The basement where it all began remained one of the most visited spots in the museum. There, on a special plaque, was written, "At this location in 2019, Marcus Thompson found the treasure that would change his life and inspire the world. But the true treasure was not the ancient coins. It was the opportunity to prove that generosity and integrity always pay off." Visitors from all over the world would stop before this plaque and leave the museum with renewed determination to make a difference in their own lives and communities. Marcus's story transcended generations. His great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the extraordinary man who had transformed a simple purchase of an abandoned cabin into the greatest lesson on character and generosity in modern history. Schools across the United States included his story in the mandatory curriculum for moral and civic education. Universities established chairs on ethics inspired by his example. Non-governmental organizations used his story to train volunteers about social responsibility. The cabin everyone laughed at him for buying became a worldwide symbol of how the most unlikely decisions can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And the basement that changed everything continued to be visited daily by people seeking inspiration for their own journeys of discovery and transformation. Because the true lesson of Marcus's story wasn't about finding hidden treasures. It was about discovering the treasure that exists within each person, the ability to make choices that transform not only our own life, but the lives of everyone around us. Everyone had laughed at him for buying a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But what was in the basement really changed everything, not just for him, but for thousands of people around the world who learned that generosity, integrity, and the courage to do what is right are the only treasures that truly matter in life. End of story. Dear listener, what an incredible journey Marcus had, wasn't it? Now tell me, what did you think of this moving story? Which part touched your heart the most? Do you believe Marcus made the right decisions? Leave your honest opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If you have a similar story to share, it would be wonderful to read it in the comments. Thank you so much for your company, and don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.